here again with an exciting episode. And we'll get a chance to speak to Janice Lansita. She's an ex-FDA and a regulatory toxicologist with over 25 years of industry experience. She's been in the biopharmaceutical industry and has worked with the FDA in the past. She's developed some non-clinical safety packages for novel products as they've entered into clinical studies or clinical trials. These products, they range from small molecules, biologics, cell therapies, peptides, ASO, DNA, RNA-based therapies across a broad range of indications, from rare disease to oncology to neurology, pain management, psychiatry, ophthalmology, anti-infectives, immunology. She's authored over 60 plus non-clinical sections for numerous of pre-IND meetings with the FDA, INDs, and clinical trial applications. She enjoys navigating through the challenges of drug development, and she really hopes and encourages every scientist to think about joining the field of toxicology. We are super excited to have her on this podcast, and I'm sure our conversations will help the viewers gain a little bit of better understanding of what toxicology is and how it emulates its very presence very early in clinical development. I'm hoping you guys can enjoy, and let's just dive right in. Janice, thank you so much for taking the time to speaking with us. And I know we have known each other for a while, and this Framing the Foundation podcast is really a way for us to give back to the community in terms of helping them understand different functional areas that contribute towards getting a drug into market, in terms of, trying to develop them from clinic, from bench into clinic. But there's a process that goes through, and which is where I think your background in toxicology really will be an value add for people listening in, and the viewers listening in. But as I mentioned in the introduction, tons of experience working in the industry, working across FDA and then moving into the industry. But would love to hear from you how your career transition has been and what got you to this place right now.
Yeah, sure. So I guess when I started out in college, I went to Barnard College in New York. I was interested in going to medicine. I wasn't really sure what that meant. I just knew that my parents wanted me to do that. It seemed like I was supposed to do that.
Yeah.
But while I was there, I studied biochemistry, environmental science. I volunteered at the hospital, Columbia Presbyterian for a while. I think I rotated to the intensive care unit, and I was supposed to sit there and hold people's hands and try to make them feel better. And after doing this for a while, I realized I am not cut out for doing this. I don't see myself in medicine at all. So I'm like, okay, this is probably not for me. So I started thinking about what I really enjoyed or really liked doing. And I enjoyed trying to understand how things work, asking questions about everything. One summer, I was in a laboratory researching pesticides. If there was any connection between pesticides and cancer, I don't think they actually found one for the compound I was looking at, but I think that really got me thinking about, okay, how do diseases occur? How does this all happen? And so I took the summer off working in this laboratory. Then I started thinking about graduate school. I applied to different graduate programs, and the programs I picked were about like understanding toxicology mechanisms, or
Interesting.
how do cancers start. Or that's what I was really interested in learning about and trying to understand that mechanistically. I got into graduate school. Fortunately, I ended up going to MIT for graduate school, and I worked in some labs trying to understand the basis of disease and carcinogenesis, basically, and those types of things. So yeah,
It's interesting how certain things trigger your curiosity, right, and drive you to
right,
want to go in your career and life. And that's what we've been talking about in this podcast, is individuals having their own journey as to how they have found themselves reach a certain, I would say, be an operator in certain functionalities. And it's just, you have to drive your life, and it kind of guides you, and you take certain risks and you get there. So, and I,
right.
I see that resonating with every guest that I speak with, Janice. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. How did your transition happen from academia into moving with working with the FDA? Would love to hear that story.
Yeah, sure. So
Let's
at the
get
end of
journey, not rather than story.
at the end of graduate school, I was thinking about what I would do next. Most people looked at postdocs. I really wanted to start working because I guess I wanted to start making money. I think at the time I was kind of tired of being a poor student, and working in the lab all the time. And I didn't really understand what it would be like to work in a company or do something else, or how I would apply what I learned in graduate school. But I knew I didn't want to keep working in a laboratory anymore. I think maybe I was saturated by that point. So I started applying to different jobs. And actually, when I was in my last few years of graduate school, I got an internship at Biogen, and it was really great that they put this program together, but they wanted to introduce students to industry and what it's like to work in industry. And it was in non-clinical development. I didn't even know what that was, but they were looking for toxicology students, so I happened to be one. And I think they realized there was a gap, that people didn't really, academics didn't really know what was happening in industry.
Mhm.
And one of my mentors there was one that came up with this idea. And so that's what really introduced me to industry. And I went there for a few years every week, and I would shadow some of the scientists. It was a really great experience. Looking back, I feel really lucky that I was chosen for that, and I got to do
Yeah.
that and experience that.
Yeah,
Um,
I see more and more of those internship roles coming up. There are a bunch of these companies that have this for summer interns to come in.
mhm.
I think it's a great initiative to really expose academic students to industry, because breaking from academia into industry is always a challenge. Uh,
Yes,
when
yes.
when I did my master's, breaking into the industry was a real challenge for me. Found a way to get there, but I wish there was more avenues open for
Right.
people to come in and help. But how did the journey evolve from there? From working at Biogen as an intern, and then
Yeah, so so after I graduated, I started applying to different jobs, and I was talking to my mentor at Biogen one day, and they're like, "Wait, you're applying to personal care product companies? Why don't you apply to us? You just spent all this time with us. Why don't you think about drug development?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. I didn't never thought about that." And it was just so weird. I don't understand what I was thinking at the time, but they were like, "Well, we might have some openings. You should apply. This is much more interesting," or at least that's what they thought, than working on personal care products. And looking back, I'm glad I listened to them. So ended up applying. I applied to one job that I didn't get there, but then they had another opening, and I ended up getting that job. And I was scared on day one. I had no idea what was going on, but I learned very quickly. Yeah, I think you just had to. And I was put on a program that actually started having clinical safety issues, and it just kind of forces you to get moving and figure out what you don't know. And if you don't know, find the people who do know and learn as much as you can. So.
yeah. Yeah. So I'm sure that laid the foundation to then getting a chance to work with the FDA. How did that
Yes, yes.
go?
So I was at Biogen from 2004 until 2008. And while I was there, I was lucky enough to meet with the FDA a few times. And I feel very fortunate for that experience, because they let me, do things I don't know that I would have gotten to do at other companies. But when I would meet with the FDA, it was very intriguing. They seemed to know so much more than we did on the inside. And sometimes they would make these comments, and I'm like, how do they know that? What else do they know? Like, where is this coming from? And my last few months at Biogen, the FDA needed farm tox reviewers. They had like a call to public action, like they didn't have enough reviewers. And I'm like, it's a sign. Like, I need to go to FDA. This is it. And so I think I wanted to do something good, and, that I wanted to understand the public health side of things. And so that's why I ended up going to FDA.
Yeah, no, this is great. I think again, I was very in my career early in my career, and these are the kind of questions that popped up. Was like, how does FDA operate? And
Right. Yeah. How does it work?
yeah, exactly. Just knowing that, but just knowing somebody who has worked at FDA and now is back in the industry, I think it is exciting, Janice. So, how was that trigger to move from FDA to back into the industry and more in a consulting capacity now?
Right, right. So I think by the end of working at the FDA, at the time there weren't a lot of positions you could move up to. I think they've changed that now, so there's more opportunity for growth. But at the time I looked around me, and I'm like, there are 10 amazing people who are better than me, how will I ever, grow
You're
professionally?
cutting yourself short, I would say. Just
Thank you. Thank you.
knowing you, have known you for a while now. I think your expertise is so valuable for the industry, which is why we are so fortunate to have work together through the Park Clinical Network, and I appreciate you being part of it.
Thanks. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Now, but that consulting framework, how did that evolve? Like,
Yeah, so it was really interesting. I was thinking about leaving, and then someone I knew from a conference was actually looking for consultants at her firm. She was leading the group at the time, and so she contacted me and just wanted to know if I was interested in consulting. And I'm like, whoa, that would be really cool. I always thought consulting was for people who were really old or people who were retired,
I
and
hear
I'm
you.
like, how does that work? I'm like, how this sounds very intriguing. I learned more about it, and I left FDA in 2014 and started consulting with a small firm. And it was really a lot of fun. I ended up leading that group, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah.
That's so nice, and kind of resonates with me as well in terms of going into consulting and then starting the company and trying to drive it forward. So I think we're in a good space, and I'm just so blessed to be surrounded by great, talented people like yourself who can come in and help us as and when we need it. But Janice, as you've seen the the talks, I would say, concept or scenario building and more biotechs trying to be very cautious in early development. Do you see any early stage biotech companies, hitting like a blind spot or areas where they feel that they should do better in terms of putting a strategy very early or identify risk very early? Or do you still see that as a challenge that they bring in somebody a little later with your expertise?
So I think sometimes they don't realize the time it takes to really to do the toxicology work in a thorough manner. And so I think sometimes people are surprised. The more experienced folks understand it takes time to do that and really think through that, or they just don't budget for it appropriately.
Okay.
They don't realize the resources it can take to really do the toxicology work appropriately.
I mean, and have you seen, like, we've come now that now this drug development, I would say, is pedigram has or scenario has changed so much where you have more
Right,
modalities coming in terms of small molecules, biologics, and
right, right.
right. How do you see toxicology impact or evolution across these different modalities? Is the backbone stay the same, or you just have to pivot or adapt to?
You do have to pivot and adapt. So I think that's where each molecule is a little nuanced. So I would say your standard small molecule package, that's probably um, the most studies you would do when you have something that is novel that can distribute throughout the body, whereas for a biologic that has more limited distribution, more specificity, so usually the tox package is smaller, and then your thinking kind of is different for gene therapy. And I'm not a gene therapy expert, but these are, more long-lived products, and so the studies you do are more targeted to what you would expect in vivo.
This is interesting because I think that even the radio pharma field has significantly grown in the last 5 years, I would say.
Hmm.
Any thoughts there on how you would handle a tox package with radio pharma versus a small molecule?
I am also not a radio farm
Fine,
expert, but I have I
we'll put
have
a
worked
spot
on
there.
a few. So what's fortunate about some of these modalities is that there are good non-clinical guidances out there which specify what you have to do. And so for radiopharmaceuticals, it depends on the dose, and you can do toxin more limited species, and especially if you understand the isotope that you're working
Yeah.
with, then if there's already clinical data on that, and it depends on the novelty of
Mhm.
the pharmaceutical. So
Yeah, and you mentioned about species. Now with FDA's new guidance about animal tox studies limited or they don't need as extensive a package. Any
mhm.
thoughts there if we're moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see that happen um, happen with time, and I think there's more comfort level for products we understand, where the targets are validated. We know how they'll behave. For more novel products, I'm not sure we're there yet,
Hmm.
but it's great that the FDA's thinking is evolving and they are open to different ways of looking at toxicity, so more in vitro models, in silico models, and rather than just a standard in vivo package.
Yeah, and again, drug development is full of risks, failures. Decisions have to be made in the right. I would say right timing. Decision is critical. Now, do you see any, tox finding that should pretty much trigger or change a course of a program? And have you come across such scenarios in the past?
Yeah, I think when there are, so like severe liver toxicity, cardiac toxicity, where there isn't much of a, or when there's a minimal therapeutic window, those are usually where you might pause development or rethink your approach or strategy. So.
Is that a difficult conversation to have with the C-suite sometimes?
It is sometimes difficult to have, and I recall an example where I had mentioned that very early on, and then I've had to repeat it multiple times for the message to get through.
Yeah, Chad, it's just knowing, and this is again a very question just came to my mind in terms of like China evolving, and in a lot of you know preclinical talks work and labs, very good established labs in China. How do you see those findings resonate into your IND packages? And this might be a very broader question as well, but have you come across scenarios where there was a challenge in really bringing that data into US to support an IND package? And I just say this because in the past I was working for a company and we were running a study in China. We had to bring in clinical data, but that was such a challenge. And again, I mean, the policies keep evolving for every country. But do you see that as a challenge with more and more companies relying more on tox labs located in China, where these studies are done and then data brought in to support an application in the US?
Right. So currently, China is not an OECD member country. And so for GLP studies conducted in China, the laboratories usually need to supply a recent audit from an OECD member country for it to be acceptable by other countries. The US has, or the FDA has actually is open to certain laboratories' work, and the US has not been as much of an issue in terms of accepting GLP studies in China if they have the appropriate audits in place. But other countries have been more challenging. And
Okay.
yes, unfortunately. Can I name countries?
Sure, you can. Absolutely.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
like the UK has been very challenging, where you need to have inspections during the study, or that's what they've requested, to have inspections ongoing during the study, as well as an OECD member country audit. I think because of the cost differential, a lot of my clients do like to place studies in China. And I do have good partnerships with laboratories there that have done excellent
Yeah.
work. And so I've enjoyed working with them.
Okay. Uh, that's good. I think there's a certain level of nervousness again with the whole political landscape, and we don't
Right,
like
exactly. Yeah,
there's
that I
so many
can't
that
comment
stuff.
on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's where I think we see a lot of nervousness as
Yes.
clients that we speak to. But have you seen that this regulatory expectations change in the last 5 to 10 years with FDA?
Yeah, I think the FDA has actually, I know early on I was more cautious about submitting studies from China, but I feel like that has improved, or,
Mhm.
um, yeah, there's more acceptance, I think, depending on the laboratory.
Yeah. I mean, yes, China as one of the countries where this is done. But overall, I mean, has FDA shifted their expectations on how this regulatory package has evolved in the last 5 to 10 years? I mean, do you see the requirements?
So I have seen more flexibility with time, even within divisions. So like some of the more conservative divisions are more open. It probably is very package specific.
Okay.
Like lower margins, for example, can be acceptable than what I would have thought, years ago, depending on the risk benefit in the
Hmm.
patient population. And then another thing I've been noticing recently is some divisions are open to, or yeah, starting INDs without, it depends on if there's no species specificity.
Right.
That certainly has been acceptable over the years, but the package that you would put in place has kind of shifted a little, where like some in vitro assays looking at potential on and off target binding are more acceptable now than they used to be. So it seems like there's more open-mindedness to that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to name any specific
No, no, no,
technologies,
absolutely. The
but
reason I'm asking, like, my question more is towards, FDA is also getting exposed to a much more different modalities, right?
right, exactly.
And
Yeah.
they're gathering the data, they're gathering experiences.
Yes.
A period of time, they'll come to a point where saying, "Hey, this is too intense. Street, drill down a little bit or make it a little more concise, so we achieve
Right.
what's needed from an oversight perspective." Before approving an IND going into patients, but at the same time, not make it too intense. So, in short, helping the industry kind of achieve its goal in a much more targeted way, rather than having them spend more intense money on more intense package that's required for approval.
Yeah, I mean, I do see a slight shift to that. I think it takes time, to see whether or not the data or the new modalities or assays actually are predictive or, fulfill what an in vivo study would do.
Right.
So,
And,
yeah.
and Janice, just based on your experience, I mean, are you seeing like regulators being much more skeptical now versus before in terms of an IND enabling tox package?
I think it's very division dependent.
Okay.
But I would say yeah,
And again, the experience will vary, right? Every modality is going
it
to be
is
different.
it is definitely varied,
Really
and
broad
it
question. I'm sorry for that, but
oh
but just
no,
just
yeah.
just getting your thoughts on, like, just interacting with the FDA. I think would it make sense to be very open about this very early in your type meetings that you have with the FDA?
I certainly, especially with difficult modalities or things that are novel, I usually try to be more open with what I'm thinking or what I think would be an appropriate approach and get their thoughts and feedback on that.
That's great, Janice. Again, a very broad question, just so that the viewers can understand. With this new age of artificial intelligence, machine learning, how do you see that impacting your functionality?
Yes. So that is
And
an
again, what
interesting
have you seen
question.
in the last couple of years? What have you seen?
Yeah. Okay. Um, so this, I guess this last year, people on my team have started exploring more AI tools and trying to understand how can we leverage this to make our lives easier or improve our day-to-day jobs and functionality. So we've tried using it to research topics just to see if that might be faster than us. And some of it has been, but you really still have to go through it in detail and check references and sources and all of that. But it is I think it's a good starting place to kind of get the lay of the land on a topic that you might not be familiar with.
And have you started seeing vendors start using this more, especially GLP Talks labs, in processing the data flow, making sure the reports are available to you on a timely? I mean,
I don't think I've seen it from a CRO perspective just yet.
okay.
Have seen, so there are different companies developing D&D writing platforms.
Yes,
So I've
exactly.
seen that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then other companies trying to do what I just said, which is searching faster on topics that are of interest. So,
Literature surveys has
yeah,
become faster. I mean, yeah,
right,
everybody using these days, Copilots, Gemini stuff, and
right, exactly.
firewalls in place. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. I mean, my take on it is like in a year's time, we'll get to really know where AI stands with all these different tools.
Right,
And, trying to bring AI into your workforce is great as long as it works for you.
right. Yeah, I'm very cautious at the moment, but it would be amazing to have a tool where you could predict toxicity or, yeah,
Now, this is great again, Janice. I think we're just 20 minutes into our conversation. I think I appreciate again you taking the time to talk to us about your experience, your journey, and the shifts that have happened with the FDA as well. So again, thank you for taking the time, and
thank you.
I'm hoping everybody watching this podcast really takes away some of the key elements from a learning perspective, and as we stay true to this framing the foundation vision that we have. But again, if anybody wants to connect with Janice, I'll put her details from LinkedIn into the description. And if you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you.
Thank you.